Thanks for checking out this highlight from the Casually Hardcore podcast. If you want to check out the full podcast after the show, please be sure to hit the top link in the description. But now, let's do it. So, Cold Casual Jason asked this following question, and I think it's in context of what we've been talking about. He says, are there any other parallel examples in different industries? For example, film, theater, TV. Want to put some context on
like
this.
The Star Wars script that got leaked.
Well, Star Wars script, but we also see this, especially we're all gamers, and so we're obviously all aware that this is a gray space we operate in when we show gameplay footage. It's a mutually beneficial area, but the comment that I've seen is that if this was a TV show, if this was a song, if this was a movie, like that is where, like, that is an absolute, like, everybody, I think we're all on, you got strict, but gameplay
you see
is
songs
different.
On Twitch, right? I mean, songs is the baseline fighting point right now on Twitch. That was the apocalypse from last month, which we did a couple of episodes.
I don't know why Twitch streamers were shocked at this.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those areas where watching from afar,
been saying, I can play whatever I want. There's nothing they can do to me, which is literally brake checking a big truck behind you and going, it's not allowed to hit me.
Yeah.
Okay, but if it does, like, you're about to get hit by a truck. Like,
and if you look at Twitch, if you look at their business model from afar, right? Like, I haven't been a Twitch streamer, but I've been watching it grow. And I've always looked at it and said, well, that's interesting. It's at bare minimum, if we're being as generous as possible, it's living on the edge of intellectual property allowances. But more than likely, it's also going over that edge in a couple of places. There was moments in time where Twitch was advertising DJ sets and things and channels like that. And one of the things that I say a lot on my channel, and that I like to impress upon, in particular, streamers of video games, is that a lot of them are really operating under what I call largesse, which is the kind of buy your leave concept, which is it probably is copyright infringement. The copyright holder doesn't have to enforce it. And as long as the publishers think that you are helping them market their game, they won't enforce it. But the problem with largesse is you're not getting the contract rights you need, with certain exceptions. And CDPR is actually an interesting inflection point because their license is very specific that you can stream. We can talk about that as well. But in general, if you're not getting those license rights, and I'm talking about the really big publishers in general, Electronic Arts, the Steam baseline license, they don't give you streaming broadcast rights. They don't give you public performance rights. And so you go and you stream these things, and talking about something like Among Us. Among Us is clearly thrilled that y'all are streaming their game. They've made a fortune, but they didn't actually license that right to you. So if there's some Among Us streamer that decides that they're going to say something, I don't know, innocuous, but something that the Among Us developers politically don't like, then they can issue 65 strikes on their Among Us streams because that technically is infringement. And that's one of those areas where I think game streamers in particular should be discussing, hey, we need to make sure that the license agreements that are benefiting these publishers and they're benefiting us and everybody's making money and everybody's happy actually convey the rights that should be conveyed. And you see that exact kind of problem writ large in those other media that you brought up, right? Music companies are not at all convinced that streaming, just naked streaming of their source material helps their sales. And they might be wrong. I know a number of people on the internet think they are wrong and they're stupid and they don't see the forest for their trees. I don't necessarily disagree, but that's where they sit and they hold those copyrights. So they go and one day they say, hey, Twitch, you're using a heck of a lot of our music. Let's just hit you with 10,000 DMCA takedown notices and see what happens. And that could happen at really any time for publisher X that says, hey, actually, we want a cut of those profits because, you've been making us money, but now we think that we should be making some of that money back too. And that's what I would like to see change, just from a legal perspective. I'm all for transparency. Let's have that negotiation up front. There was a comment, I can't remember who said it, I did a video on it, from somebody that said, essentially streamers should be paying us for the rights.
The Stadia,
Stadia.
And not the guy over all of Stadia, but one of their studios. He was just expressing his opinion. And man, like, I was just like, and it's unfortunate that he's also connected with Stadia because Stadia currently,
it was not a good look.
Well, Stadia currently still has a section of gamers still very anti-Stadia, despite the fact that like there is a wave of pro Stadia mindset that is just kind of taking on based off of Stadia's own recent promotions. Anyway, I'm a fan of Stadia.
Yeah. We've seen some games do things like pull themselves off GeForce Now, and we assume that's because they're waiting to get paid to go to a streaming platform. So it's not that GeForce Now is not. And I have a couple of videos on
GeForce Now, and
it's that they very specifically want to be paid, and so by offering it to the free service, you're not going to see Stadia cut Blizzard a check if they allow Blizzard games to run on GeForce Now. They're going to, why would we pay you? You let these free guys do it. So like that makes sense. So to shift that a little, one of the things that when the takedown is issued, or when Google does the takedown, right, they say that under penalty, right? This is Fido's question. There is no penalty unless Google were to say, okay, if you do this wrong, we're going to strip you of this. But then they open themselves up to, now they've left CDProjectRed with the only option being to actually no longer request the confirmation, but actually go after Google. So like, is there any chance that Google ever implements some penalty or changes the way this stuff works to stop
penalty to whom? I just want to make sure I get the question.
CDProjectRed for
doing it wrong,
for false claiming, for abusing the system.
Yeah. So if you go and you look at YouTube sites, they've got various warnings that say don't do this falsely and things like that. Sure. You know, YouTube operates in what we usually call DMCA plus, which is that the statute has a DMCA component and says, hey, if you take it down when you receive notice, you won't be liable for contributing to the infringement. If you put it back up when you receive a counter notice, you won't be liable for it being up there, and the federal courts can sort it out. YouTube does an extra step, which I actually, and I get in trouble for this from my commenters sometimes, I actually think is pretty good in the majority of the cases, which is the content ID system, which effectively allows you to infringe on copyright. And the copyright holder, when it's working properly, says, okay, so that's our stuff. We'll take your ad money. And it's not an infringement case. It's not a federal court claim. You could potentially get subscribers from that video. You just don't make the ad dollars on it. And I think that in general, for a lot of people that just want to put stuff up that, you know, they make fan videos, or they do things with the footage that maybe is a little bit beyond fair use, I think that makes a lot of sense for a large portion of the cases. Where you start to get into issues is when you've got things like Cyberpunk or Sony, and they're just using the process to ping things. And what you really have to go through, Google is not going to step in because they only ever get liability for doing anything different from the statute. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, we take it down when we get notice. We might put it back up when we get counter notice. And that's another kind of portion of the discussion, because all the DMCA does is provide safe harbors. So the great fall in the DMCA is that there isn't any liability that actually attaches to these platforms taking them down. So there isn't actually any reason that they have to put them back up.
Right.
You go and you look at the Twitch terms of service, you go look at the YouTube terms of service, there'll be a sentence in there somewhere that, just paraphrasing, will say, we have the right to decide what we host, and we can take down your stuff whenever we feel like it.
Yeah.
And once that's the contract that you've signed up with them, then they're taking it down for even an erroneous DMCA claim. And they say, well, put it back up. I gave you a counter notice. They say, sue us. We have the contract right to do so. That's why you saw when Twitch basically put out their really demeaning notice and said, hey, we know this isn't right, but we're not going to listen to your counters and delete everything. And people said, can they even do that? They're not following the DMCA. And I said, the DMCA does not enact legal liability on you. It protects you from other liability. So if you want to go find a way to sue Twitch, you got to go find a different way. They're just saying, we don't need this shield. And they're right. They don't need that shield.
Okay. Yeah, that's how that works in. So in a real estate transaction, the realtor will always put, at least here in Texas, will always put the square footage as the county documents it. It's exactly for the reason you're describing with Google. The reason for that is that the county has a documented square footage, and then the buyer expects a reasonable square footage. And as long as they simply pass on the county's number, even if they know that number to be wrong, comes back, they can go, well, ask the county. And so they're just kicking it down the road. The problem with that is that means that you now have an expert in the industry who has an ability to improve things, and is simply not doing so because they don't want to expand their liability, because there's no compensation for it. You don't make more money on a transaction for having better square footage provided to the buyer as information. So you don't open yourself up to more liability because you're not being paid for it. You do pay for errors and omissions and all of that, insurance. And so I guess then my question to you, is there any action that as content creators we would take because we want Google to not be such an absentee parent.
I hope that you really enjoyed that highlight, and I hope that you check out the full podcast. Again, link is in the description. Thanks for being here, and hope you have a fantastic day, you wonderful, beautiful individual.